Here we are again, eh?
Evening.
Good evening to you, and congratulations on such a nice stripy top.
Thank you, Graham.
Yeah, it
Um,
does suit you.
uh, One thing from last week, we ended with this idea of the North, which inevitably I've gone away and you think about it. The one thing that was missing was Hit the North by The Fall, singularly in my top five favourite songs ever. So as a kind of segue from The Fall, that sound that comes out right at the beginning of that do 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 do. This week we were going to talk about sound, and I think for me it's important to make a distinction between sound and music at this point. Although we probably will talk about music, I'm particularly interested in the idea of sound to begin with. And like a lot of these, what we've been talking about, the obvious question is for me to say to you, Graham, what's your relationship to sound? But that's way too general and complicated, I think. But
Well, I'll have a go though if you want.
I was going to sort of throw it back in the sense of we tend to. Again, you asked me the question about the sea right at the beginning. What's your first memory of the sea? Do you have such a thing? Do you have an audio memory? What's your early audio memory of sounds? Is there such a thing?
Yeah, I mean that's something I've been thinking about in the build up to today as well, because it speaks to the question that almost sounds like we're Greek philosophers, which is kind of what kind of a sense is sound when we think about the basic human senses. How is sound different to sight, smell, touch, and the others? And I think there are some distinctive characteristics about sound which we can explore. And one of them is that it's inescapable, right? It's the thing that is just there constantly. Sound isn't something you can't close. You can put your fingers in your ears, but actually you're still hearing things. You can't escape sound, and if you're in the world, there's always sounds all around you, and you can't really tell where they're from or whether they're close or far away necessarily. So even if one is going to kind of think about what early formative soundscapes one can recall, I think it's actually really difficult. There are these spikes, moments where you can recall some interruption in the flow of life that's percussive, is marked by a sound. But by and large, sound is just so it's so constant. I don't think it's the same as sight. You could say the same thing about sight, but sound is just something that's always creeping up on you. It's always behind you as much as in front of you. It's loud and quiet and far and near, and you can't really. For that reason, I think more than any other sense, you can't really make sense of sound. It's just constant.
Oh, good,
I
good,
think you
good.
almost have a white noise in your life all the
Yeah, yeah.
time. Not hearing it would be
Oh,
very
yeah, absolutely.
peculiar.
I think where you started with senses, it's the first thing I wrote down. And I'm lucky, and I guess you are, that we do have relative audio capacity we can hear. And obviously, although I have tinnitus in this ear, it was your fault with your volumes when you were playing your guitar. Um,
Yeah,
it's this idea that you can close your eyelids and refuse to see, but you can't. You don't have any doors in your ears. It's something that's permanently. And I think we learn very quickly how to. I think the white noise is a really interesting thing in itself. But I was thinking the question, if it was to me, was I think because I have got dyslexia, I built up a kind of vocabulary, audio vocabulary, really quickly in terms of particularly speech. So I had a kind of very fast cognitive understanding of words as sounds rather than as written things. And the sound of words became not more important, but became my primary navigating tool. As soon as I saw words on a piece of paper, it freaked me out. And I couldn't make the correspondence between them. The audio sound of a word, apple, didn't correspond to the written word apple. And I think in there's now I know more about dyslexia, I think how you build up a spatial understanding of the world differently. And obviously that's to do with sound. So the sound of an apple was just as much about the apple as it was the written word apple, if you had to talk, describe. So my earliest recollections have got to be words and speech, noise in that way. And obviously there's an intimacy, I think, in your earliest memories are of probably your mother, your father, those sounds that become intimate to you, the whispers, the shh, or the
Yeah.
stop doing that, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
became everything. And I think how you build up a spatial understanding of the world absolutely is. I mean, again, I'm fortunate that I do have relatively good audio. Clearly, if you don't, it must create a very different spatial awareness around you.
Yeah.
And I think what you said, there was something in that which it's like you hear a sound and then you look or you think about the object that made the sound. So you hear something, a door or something non-visible, you hear the sound and then you try and connect that to the object or the thing that made the sound. And I think that's been a really big part of my imaginative, creative process.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is non-visible. It isn't about the visible. Where if I can see in front of me, if I flick the screen, I can see where the sound is. But normally the sound is somewhere spatially around you. Hence, you
Yeah.
get scared when you hear noises. You can't see what made the sound, and that's the whole horror noir fiction, isn't it? That you hear
Mm. Mm.
the creak of the staircase and you anticipate something that's happening. And I
Yeah.
think there's something in that. And I think it's precog. It's something about knowledge and how you build up knowledge. So it's a kind of educational thing as well. We don't talk about it in those terms, but for me, my experience is very directly connected to that.
I think the point about um, the early sounds you hear and the fact that you can't switch off to sound. You can push it further, and I suppose if thinking about it now, if you asked me now at the beginning, if the beginning of the podcast was now, and you said what were your earliest memories of sound, then I would probably say the uterus. It's
Oh,
the one sense we have before we're born. This is
oh
why loads of
gosh.
middle class mothers are always playing Mozart into their bellies, right? They think I'm going to play this for my kid, and the kid's going to grow up to be um, in the media or a doctor or whatever it is they want their child to do. So it is, if there is white noise, it's probably the blood flow of your mum that you
That's
hear
true.
first.
Yeah.
So there is something about sound which is precognitive,
Yeah,
as you
definitely.
say. Um, I think that's right. And then the other thing and it does steer us a bit towards music, so I won't talk about it very much. But there is a synesthesia to sound, right? It tends to accompany other senses, and there isn't really anything more total a sensory experience than witnessing someone sing, right? Because you have the sound of their voice, you
Hmm.
have the melody, and you have the lyrics. So when you're talking about the intimate associations between text and sound, singing, and particularly the
Yes.
live performance of singing, is almost the most. It's a totalizing sensory experience driven by sound, but
Hmm.
actually also visual and textual as well. So it is a remarkable thing. That's why people who witness singing, particularly powerful pieces of singing, find themselves transported.
Mm.
I listened to Arvo Pärt's Passion at St Martin on the Fields Church about 2-3 weeks ago, and it was a transporting experience. I'm not a
Mm.
religious person, but
No, no, I
you
agree.
would have to be some sort of house brick not to understand how impossibly overloading that kind of
Mm.
experience is.
And I think with that is the way in which sound arrives at you, and we process sound um, in a very particular way without words because it's totally experiential. So in a way, it just goes in, doesn't it? It goes into your body as well as audio. You experience sound physically, and I think probably if we do get onto music, there's something about the way you experience music in a way that's very different, and rightly, from reading or looking or you know, and requires a kind of different. I think culturally, it requires a different way of trying to find the right words here, appreciating or acknowledging sound. It has a different criticalness. And the thing which, I mean, you could say, it's perhaps not wanting to create hierarchies, but really maligned human experience, the way we undervalue sound potentially. And I've been reading over the last week, I mean, two books simultaneously about trauma, and the one consistent thing that comes up is sound in trauma experiences, be it from Vietnam or whether it's in really horrible domestic cases, is the way that sound triggers trauma. It's not a verbal textual thing, it's an audio, embodied audio recall that sound has. Be it the slaps sound of skin on skin, or whether it's we're off into all those other things. And because it's more than just a rational cognitive thing, it's a bodily thing that is recalling it. When I remember when I broke my leg when I got hit by a car, there was a very particular sound I heard, and I can feel it right now. I can feel that sound, and it was
Mm.
internal, and yet there must have been an external sound. Um, and you carry that, I think, but I can't describe it. It's impossible to describe. It's this other knowledge we have, and again, that's not to sort of make it better or worse or more important or less important, but I do think it's kind of underthought in a way.
Yeah.
Um, Particularly, because I suppose my thing was that if our lived experiences are becoming increasingly lived through images, and the images of our lived experience are kind of becoming predominantly defining us, you lose all the kind of relationship then to smell, sound in particular. And I think
Yeah.
we could go into that, about the spectacle of the lived experience has become this portable device that gets updated infinitely every second of without sound, they're images. And I think there's a real dislocate happening in that.
But is that quite right? Do you think because I was wanting to talk about the iconic heart of all of this is the phone. It's not really a phone, is it? Nowadays, I just call them spy devices or something, or app carriers or something, because people
You said what?
app
Spying.
carriers, spying
App.
devices, or app carriers,
Or
something
yeah,
app carriers. Yeah, something that annoys people,
good.
rather than calling them phones, because they're not really phones. But anyway, they are at the heart of the highly mediatized day to day that people everywhere experience. And I was thinking about that and thinking, okay, so here's as I say, the device that drives modern day-to-day life cognitively, sensorily, and it seemed to me that actually it is co-equally sound and vision. People put ear pods in all over the place, and they're largely not listening to the world around them, and they're often listening to highly compressed music, and then this kind of endless seriality that is generated by TikTok and other apps, where you just get repeated jingles and phrases and clips of one kind or another. And so I wondered. I didn't really find my way to a powerful conclusion with this, but it did seem to me that if we start looking at the most kind of novel and all-encompassing and powerful sensory structures within which people live their lives, they are as much to do with sound as they are to do with vision. And I think the phone generates a form of sound that's very similar to the kinds of image that it produces. It's just a bland, compressed,
agree,
attentionless screed of noise, which squawks like a pixelated parrot into our ears, and we consume it, and that's the world.
I think good point. Really, the way you said that, absolutely. I think I probably incorrectly kind of separated out the visual from the experience of the visual, and the experience of the visual is absolutely, totally, entwined with the jingle or the do 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 or whatever it is, or the way in which certain human behaviors getting or has become reduced to these tiny little moments accompanied by generic sounds that are part of the generic tiny moments. And I got thinking about the way, I was thinking about the difference between television and cinema, again, in a kind of loose sense, that in television, sound leads you to the image. So the build-up of a narrative is created through a sound that takes you to the image. Whereas really traditional cinema, the two things were working absolutely both for and against each other. And good cinema, for me, the sound is as equally as important as the image. And they don't describe each other. They're not the same thing. So I'm thinking of classic cinematic moments where the object is as much about the sound as it is the image. And it's not just a backdrop, infill, ambient thing. It's an object as well as the image.
Yeah.
Whereas in television, it's kind of, to reduce it to it's a bit more predictable. You kind of know what you're going to look at because of the way the sound leads you there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think partly those the ways in which sound is used in performance of one kind or another goes back to that question that you mentioned, which I think is right, and probably derives from the fact that sound waves are really wide, which is that there's a physicality to sound, and the best or the most impressionistic moments in if one's listening to music or going into the cinema are the moments when the sound really goes through you. You kind of can feel the little pores inside your bones vibrating. and I can remember, this is a memory of sound. 1977, so however old I was then, 10, going to see, going up to that London, to Leicester Square, and seeing Star Wars when it first came out, the
Yes.
first Star Wars before the other 206 Star Wars films that followed. And I was a big Star Wars fan because I was 10, so don't judge me. And very excited. And the film starts. I'm not a big fan of John Williams' music, actually. Generally, I think he's got a million Oscars for his compositions, but they're a bit annoying. But the beginning of that film just starts with one chord, right, and it comes on before there are any images, and it's just one chord played by, I think, probably all of the brass instruments, and it was fucking unbelievable, the effect that had. And then the kind of telescoping text starts rolling, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Oh no, that comes on first, just that phrase, and then the music hits, and then the narrative starts to scroll. And yeah, it was visceral. It was not just the sound itself. It was like being shaken or maybe pulled.
Absolutely. Yeah, and again, it becomes as much the object, doesn't it, as any subject. It's when you were talking about it, I was thinking, gosh, yes, there's. I mean, David Lynch is the obvious other one immediately that jumps to mind, but there's that great moment at the end of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, where they're at their final shootout and they both say, "Okay," they come out from the shelter and it freezes, but the sound
Yeah,
carries on. So
yeah,
in a way, there's this, and then you realise throughout the film that the two things have been doing this thing together all the way through, and some of it is more what you would call like music, which sets scene, sets emotionally, puts a key to the narrative. But in other parts, the sound is actually as an active object as much as the visual side.
mm, yeah,
And I kind of, from that, I was thinking again, how disappointed I get, with. I should probably try and use examples, but I can't think of one at the moment. Just narratively, how easy it is to create sweet sugar candy moments with sound and images, rather than seeing the way in which, you can. Again, there's great examples I can think of. Um, so that must have come from somewhere, because obviously pre-cinema we were looking at the world through images artistically that were silent, i.e., painting, printmaking, drawing. Clearly, obviously, had no audio, or you were listening to music, and the two were never kind of. I know a lot of moments in art history, the way in which synesthesia with color and sound, and also evoking through relationship between music and artists working with music and blah de blah. But this bringing together of image and sound was a real moment, I think, that cinema opened up this whole new
yeah,
field of expression. Um, and again, the kind of illustrational use of sound is always really disappointing. Just like,
come back.
oh, we've got an internet moment.
Shit.
We're back. I can hear
Oh,
you.
we are back. Yeah, good.
Uh,
Right. Okay.
I can hear you, Graham. We've got sound.
We've got sound. See, it was all on purpose.
All right.
We
Yeah,
did
and
it on purpose.
the little AI bot will fill in the gap where I was blinking and frozen and whatever.
Yeah, yeah, it'll all be
So
good. We'll maybe put some background music on to
that'd be
keep
good.
the
So I was
punters calm.
thinking about, the this kind of relationship that opened up in cinema, where you could suddenly use these two really powerfully expressive elements together. Got me then thinking about gaming today and the way that sound's used in gaming. it got me thinking about, because I've been reading about this idea of trauma in warfare, the way that sound in the Second World War, First World War, they started, experimenting with frequencies of sound as a weapon.
Yeah.
And then horribly, you're moving into the dark area of clearly of torture, where sound is a age old thing where you don't allow somebody, and that goes back to the medieval idea of how we, and torture and prison systems that deliberately messed with your audio, body rhythms. To end up in this idea, because I don't know enough about it, but the way that AI, I presume, uses the same principles with text and image as it would with sound. It will just scrape what's already out there and regenerate sound. But whether it can produce, we'd have to try it. If you went in on one of the generative programs and said, make a sound of early morning bird song, I'm sure it would be able to do it, wouldn't it?
Piece of piss, yeah. Right, a symphony, and it would do that.
I know it can do things like that, so I've tried it
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. When's it coming out?
It was shit, Graham.
Higgins' First Symphony
It was shit.
in D minor.
It sounded like all other symphonies that have ever been made in D minor. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. I mean, just to come back on that, because there's a couple of things I think probably are worth mentioning, if worth discussing, and one of them is about the relationship between sound and power.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's worth recognizing that to some degree, when a load of different sounds are being produced across all sorts of different media platforms, there is a I wouldn't want to go, I'm not too much, I'm never too willing to lean into Foucault, but there is something, I think, in the biopolitics of the media type sound experience, which is that it's in some fashion or another a rough analogue of Pavlov, that we have sound stimuli that then create desires or emotions, affect of one kind or another. The kind of ringing of the bell excites the dog to eat the food, and then you take the food away and ring the bell, and the dog still salivates. That famous experiment, misunderstood, but famous experiment. You can kind of imagine how because humans are wired roughly in the same way as dogs, way smarter than dogs, but roughly in the same way, that certain sounds then generate certain kinds of emotional response. And I don't like Foucault's kind of we're all nodes in a system of power, because it's slightly misanthropic and politically defeatist, but there is something there. The other point I wanted to make in terms of sound and power is that technological point you were talking about earlier, which is that sound is a weapon, and particularly since the rise of piracy in the Taiwan Straits and the Red Sea, a lot of ships will carry what are effectively sound cannons, which I remember seeing footage of when I used to do African politics, footage from the side of boats, people firing sound cannons at Somalis in their fishing boats trying to raid the yachts or sometimes the cargo ships. And it basically kind of gives you internal organ rupturing, right? Because as I said, sound is a physical. Sound waves are have a wide enough amplitude to be considered physical phenomena.
Totally.
There are ways in which the thing we call sound can be used in ways that are about the exercise of power. It looks flat. It looks like it's a universal and we all participate, but it can also, like every technology, be a device.
Absolutely. I remember reading about Portland Down when they were doing the experiments there with different frequencies that could break concrete, or it could, explode your body organs and things like that. And volume is the other thing I wanted to bring up. Is the idea of wave frequencies in a way, because I'm really interested in, is it the right word, ocular, visual frequencies of
Mm.
colours and bandwidths. Obviously, audio bandwidths are massive thing, aren't they, in terms of how sound arrives at our bodies. And you mentioned dogs before and their range, because we both have dogs and live our lives with our dogs and are very aware of our dogs, how they experience the world with us. And obviously their audio is absolutely extraordinary, in a way
Mm.
that our bandwidth, whether it's blind, we're blind to bandwidths, I presume, because they must be going in, but maybe we've retuned our bandwidths in some way, and I remember, because we've talked about it before, spending, upwards to a month, most winters in North Russia, I was really aware my audio capacity changed because it's quiet a lot of the time, and unless you're listening to the rhythm and cycle of the monastery through the bells, you become acutely aware of your body in a different way, and you experience your body differently, but sound around you, because of snow, creates this wonderful damping effect, but the coldness creates this other effect, which is,
Yeah.
temperature affecting sound and how it arrives at you differently. With the sense that your soundscape, I guess, because I live in a city, you're semi-rural, semi-by the sea, whatever, I don't know what it is anymore. How you become immune to certain things. And you mentioned before white noise, and again in power structures, and white noise has been used, hasn't it? As a weaponized thing to create white noise, so you can't think. Literally, it blots out your ability to differentiate between things.
Yeah, General Noriega, who was rather saliently compared with what's happened recently in Venezuela. General Noriega was arrested by the U.S. Marines and is currently, I think, still alive in a American prison. He was in his presidential palace, and the Marines surrounded it and roadblocked it, and they set up outside the presidential palace a huge number of very loud speakers, and they just played a really, really bad American rock music,
What?
24 hours a day, so that General Noriega, who was the Panamanian dictator, couldn't sleep, and eventually he gave up, and they arrested him, and I think he's in a Florida jail still.
Yes.
So one of the first of these kind of new, if you like, gangster logics of the American state of arresting or blowing up heads of state was Panama, 1990, I think it was, and it was an international extrajudicial arrest that relied upon American AM radio being blasted into a presidential palace. So yeah, sound. Not just white noise, but bad rock music can also be used as a
This
way
is.
to
I
get
know,
your
like in Guantanamo, they have
man.
this thing of constantly playing certain MOR, American music, loud, 24 hours a day. The other bit of sound, which, and we can both relate to this very directly, is, we've kind of touched on it, but the sheer emotional force that sound has. We talked about the sea and the way that embodies something which is kind of pretty, I don't know, am I going to say this, universally kind of understood in a certain way. But it's also something like being stood at Bramall Lane just before kickoff and hearing that sound collectively. I mean, I'm not like you aligned to any religious. It is a kind of spiritual thing when you have this collective voice, creates this huge sound, that gives you goosebumps thinking about it, and I think you can kind of see where being able to harness or align that to certain things, of course, it's got massive persuasive possibilities, hasn't it? It didn't help
Yeah,
Sheffield United a lot of the time, but you imagine as a player, they talk about, oh, the crowd was the extra man on the pitch. Do you imagine that noise that would, what it would do to your body if you were part of this thing when you're suddenly like, oh my God, it's to feel that must be really something, and again, must relate back to sort of quite primal things about being collectively able to make noise together,
yeah,
be it
yeah,
warfare, be it
absolutely.
kind of tribal thing, be it a spiritual thing. But collective noise,
Yeah,
when you stop listening to the words, but you become part of the sound. I know in my experience in monastic life in Russia, that they weren't interested in words; they were interested in the harmonies and the sound that you generate, and you accumulate this repetition that is embodies you getting out of your body in order to then whatever happens beyond your body. That's a
yeah.
very particular thing. But this idea of collective sound, given we've
It's the
been talking,
nature of.
yeah, yeah, given we've
Yeah, I
been
mean,
talking
it's
about individually my experience, but there's a collective experience coming together. If you hear a sound, everyone rushes off because they want to be part of this great sound that's happening.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think it is in the nature of the human to want to become part of a chorus, right? A union of voices is I think, the definition of a chorus, and taking that in its broadest sense, it just means singing together, right? And it is something that gives you, how might one put it? It is a sublime experience, and it does trigger deep emotional resonance, and it also creates deep senses of fellow feeling, right? You can't sing in chorus without other people singing with you, not
Yeah.
just making noise like a Millwall fan, but because they do that, they just go like that for ages. That's their thing. But
So
but
this,
but singing something together, and that song, the Bramall Lane song, is for me, and it's the same for anyone who's learned a piece of choral music, or like people who all love Taylor Swift and sing along with Taylor Swift. It's all the same thing. It's this wonderful shared exuberance, I suppose, where you have to be at one with other people, and you produce something that is beyond any single person, and is
yeah,
almost impossible to describe in terms of how it affects you emotionally, I think.
I agree. So then we've got to flip it the other side and then talk about collective silence. And I was going to ask you, when was the last time you experienced real silence?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I wondered about silence, and I suppose I wasn't expecting that question, but I think the answer for me would be actually from what I mentioned earlier, which was the choral music of Arvo Pärt, which had
Mm.
within it, the way it was directed, it lasted nearly 2 hours. The piece on a CD lasts 90 minutes. And what they decided to do was to leave long silences between the different pieces of music. And that's a silence that means something. It's a thick silence. There's maybe 300 people in a room and nobody's making any noise. That was a silence. That was a silence worth listening to, I suppose. Outside of that, I don't think I ever have
Mm.
silence. When I used to wander off by myself in pursuit of knowledge, I didn't go to the tundra. I went to the subtropics in sub-Saharan Africa, and it was always noisy.
Sure.
If there wasn't some activity taking place amongst the people I was with, then it would be a load of really noisy animals
Yes.
doing loads of kind of noises and without sounding like I'm, giving some sort of stupid travelogue. If it wasn't the animals, then it would be the vegetation. It was just always noisy. So
Interesting.
yeah, I didn't have
I think
snowscapes on.
yeah, my sense. I mean, I thought about radio silence. There's this idea of there's so many seconds, isn't there, where you're not allowed to have silence on the radio.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
also then the collective silence, there's moments of I don't like, of remembrance, which is, about silence. And I really like the thing at football when they change this idea, of remembering somebody. We'll now have a minute's silence. Then suddenly it stopped and people started applauding.
yeah. I
It's
agree.
not silence. And I think the misconception is silence is about emptiness. And I always think of silence as a fullness, and how we kind of we look at we think about those relationships as, oh, there's nothing happening because it's really quiet. Well, fuck you. There's a lot going on in that moment. So
Yeah,
again, it's like that's what I was thinking about, when we kind of put the idea together. It's like we tend to feel we've got to keep consuming sound all the time.
mm,
And there's a lot of kind of social cultural theory about, the noise and cultural noise and everything. But it does make you think about, God, it's sometimes just great to be quiet, and not feel you've got to fill every second up with a beat or a sound and not wanting to get into
yeah,
some kind of Zen idea about, which I'm not interested in particularly, but, the emptiness thing was what I was thinking about. It's full up. It's just that we've become culturally, are we a bit kind of paranoid about, oh, there's nothing happening, which is just nonsense. It's kind of stupid illusion. Because
yeah, yeah,
your body needs moments, hence you go to sleep, of kind of, hence in torture, you stop people having silence because your body needs physically to just stop for a while, doesn't it? And not be
mm,
on alert for things happening all the time.
yeah. I mean, I think silence is something that has almost without, unless I've missed some powerful statement on this, something that has been absent, stolen, absent, removed, eroded from contemporary life,
Agree.
quite profoundly.
I agree.
I'm not saying everyone in some pre-industrial age
Yeah,
wandered
yeah.
around, in silence, listening to their own breathing and all that spiritual gubbins. I'm not interested in either. But I'll give you one example, and then I suppose you can make of it what you will. And that's the library. When I started going into libraries at university, I fucking loved libraries. And one of the things that was obvious about the library is that it was as quiet as you could be, with lots of other people following their own projects. And there was a cultural protocol that silence was what everyone was trying to approximate to keep quiet. Well, the long story short is, to fast forward 30 years from those halcyon days, is that every student is on a phone or on a computer terminal. Nobody's quiet. I mean, apart from the fact nobody's really interested in books. There's no silence in university libraries. Everyone's making noises, and if they're not making noises, then they've got their earbuds in, and they're listening to probably some podcast saying, here's the 3-minute skinny on the Westminster system, and getting their research done on some infomercial style podcast that lasts for 2 minutes. Is, unless you're listening to this in the library, you're wasting your time. So yeah, I think that the loss of silence, it sounds like one of these kind of quite conservative lamentations about modernity, but there is something in silence which is at least worth recognizing as a loss.
I agree with that. And I'm sure there is a choice, and some people clearly make a choice to, not live in an environment that's like I do in the city, which is always stuff going on. and but I think it's a choice you make rather than, because I imagine, oh, it's, certain areas that I've been to in West Coast Scotland, whatever, which are beautiful and they're quiet relative to living in Sheffield, and the kids, people I've spoken to, the kids want to leave because it's too quiet. There's not enough going on.
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
Cultural notion of something, and good on them. And it's interesting, how those people I do know have actually moved back now because they want to get back to something where, they recognize the quality of less noise, to put it banally. And
Mm.
as a kind of anecdotal way to end, maybe without wanting to sound Simon and Garfunkel, listen to the sound of silence, which might take us to where we might think about music as the next round of the weekly pod. Do you think?
I do. Yes, that would be, I think, a perfect little segue.
Yeah. So now we should
Love
make a lot of noise, shouldn't we? And then finish. Or silence.